Hello everybody, my name is Donna Hanson, and today I will be presenting Inquiry Learning Station titled Your Side Vision and Color. This is from the textbook on page 204, and I will just be going over the document and going over the procedure and sort of the rationale for this activity. So let's get started. We're off to kind of a rough start with the fact that there were no NGSS standards that fit this activity, but I didn't really want to try and force any standards in that weren't, reasonable or relevant, and I didn't want to have to change the activity that the textbook gave to align to a standard that isn't truly relevant to, the activity or the objectives aligned with the activity or anything like that. So that was a choice I made, and that may affect my grade, but I didn't want to force something that didn't really fit. So next we have the objectives. So at the conclusion of this lesson, students will be able to explain the function of peripheral vision and predict ways that peripheral vision can help humans and other animals. So the activity requires that students have 4 small paper squares of different colors and 4 larger paper squares of different colors. The key vocabulary and the key concepts for this activity are peripheral vision, retina, and optic nerve. And then the definitions of those: peripheral vision is what you see on the side, so like I can see my hands right now even though I'm not looking at them. The retina is the outermost covering on your eyeball, and the optic nerve is the thing at the back of the eyeball that lets you actually see it. It processes information in a way that your brain is seeing. So differentiation considerations for this activity. The students who are most likely to struggle with this activity are those who are visually impaired because it is based in vision. So students who have limited peripheral vision and those who are colorblind may not be able to effectively participate in this activity without difficulty. So to help these students, offer a variety of colors so that colorblind students have choices that they can actually see. So you don't want to have, just red and green, and you have a student who's red-green colorblind, and they can't, tell what color they're looking at. You want to have color options that extend beyond, one colorblind palette. And then offer different sizes so that students with limited peripheral vision can still have their vision stimulated by these objects. Audio impaired students may not be able to hear when their partner says to stop, so to combat this, their partners may use hand gestures or physical touch to signify that they can see the object and that the student should stop moving it. English language learners and bilingual students may have difficulty communicating with a partner who only speaks in English. Their partners should be provided with the translation for stop and any and all colors involved in the experiment. And the bilingual students should also be provided with the English translation for these terms. This way communication is bridged. It's not up to just one student to learn a new language and to, sort of work through this difficulty on their own. They'll be working as a team. And then students with 504s and IEPs may have difficulty staying on task or understanding what exactly is expected of them. As a default, instructions should be given clearly and explicitly so that students, don't face these struggles. And all students should be allowed to ask any clarifying questions they have. I hate, and I've seen it in classrooms so often, when teachers will give, instructions and there will be a student or two that's just so obviously lost. And then they're like, all right, go do it. You have to take a moment to, any questions so that your students are able to clarify something and they aren't, lost. So if there's a student that you have who has behavioral issues, if they need to be paired with someone familiar or maybe someone who's good at staying focused, these accommodations should be offered. Every student is different. Every behavioral disability is different. If a student who has behavioral problems would work better with someone that they know, if they're just more comfortable working with a friend, you should be willing to offer that accommodation. Sometimes there are students who have behavioral issues that you put them with their best friend and then they don't get anything done. They can't stay on focus. They can't stay on task. So maybe that specific student needs someone who's better at staying on task. It's really a student-to-student basis with differentiation, and you can't be too general because every student is different. The safety considerations for this activity is mainly just that students need to be careful with the corners of the paper squares. They will be moving a paper square around in their partner's peripheral vision, and they need to keep it away from their eyes and away from their partner's eyes. A paper cut to the retina could be permanently damaging, and you don't want students to do that to themselves or to their classmates. So now we're going to go through the 6 E's and the procedure for this activity. So before the activity begins, ask students to follow this thought prompt. Suppose you notice an object from the corner of your eye while staring straight ahead. Can you notice it is there before you can tell its color? Or can you also tell the color at the same time? How far to the side can you tell different colors apart? So, since this thought prompt is purely hypothetical, students will likely provide a variety of answers. So you're going to want to have them respond to this prompt either verbally or in a journal. I personally would use a journal for any of these prompts that you'll see later in this activity. I think journals are important so that students can reference their answers after the activity or, during the activity to see how their thinking has changed or evolved. And it's also useful for assessment purposes to have written documentation of students, before and after thoughts. So that's the engagement piece. And then the exploration segment is the actual activity. So at the station, you're going to have all the supplies set out and labeled. And if you do have English language learners or bilingual students, I recommend labeling them in all languages that your classroom contains. And then post these steps somewhere for the students to follow. Again, I would post these in all languages that your classroom contains. So this is just detailing the steps. We don't need to go through all of that, but the safety considerations are, there's one safety consideration under the 1 asterisk, and then there is an example of a picture under the 2 asterisks. So, yeah. The explanation segment, students will answer these questions, and again, I recommend using the journal so that they can, use their answers for future reference. They can read it later. You can read it later. You can use it for assessment. And then for the elaboration portion, have your students discuss this prompt about structure in the eye. So, you're hoping to hear that they are talking about that the color detectors must be, further back in the eye. If something is here, you can't detect the color because that's not activating the color sensors. So the e-learning in the text that was provided is to have students research glaucoma on the internet and describe the relationship between the eye disorder glaucoma and side vision. Now, I personally thought that was a bit vague. I would provide students with a few more guiding questions to aid them in their research and provide them with a few online resources. So this way they're not, kind of doing this on their own, just typing glaucoma into a search bar on, you don't want them to just open Google and type glaucoma. That's not going to be efficient research. You want to sort of guide them through that. They're not, I didn't think it was specific enough. And then for the evaluation, the text says that students should describe situations where side or peripheral vision would be important. You could make this a journal activity where students sort of wrap up all their writing and what they've learned. I would encourage students to think outside the box, beyond their personal lives, a situation where in their life side or peripheral vision would be useful. Think about, other people's lives. Your students don't drive, but peripheral vision is very useful when driving a car. Or even think about, being a deer in the woods and seeing a bear moving off to the side. That's a situation in which peripheral vision is useful. So you want your students to think outside the box, get creative with it, and Yeah. So finally, the assessment piece. Those 3 journal responses will be the main item being assessed. In these responses, you want to look for understanding of the concept of peripheral vision. You want to look to see that your students are thinking critically and going beyond their own thinking. And then have students ask their own questions. And then when you compare that first journal to the last, so that first journal where they're talking about hypotheticals and the last where they're talking about what they've learned and, applying it to the real world, you want to look for proof that students were able to answer questions they had at the start. So the formative assessment will be student participation in this activity. If students are participating in a way that isn't really helpful, or, they're not actually learning anything, they probably won't get a good grade on their participation, because you want them to be genuinely invested and safely and truly learning from this activity. And go around the room while students are writing in their journals and sort of ask a few questions to gain an idea of where their thinking is. And then for the summative assessment, you want to look at their journal responses for evidence of growth and understanding. And then the 2 language functions that I chose to apply to my lesson description were explaining the function of peripheral vision and predicting ways peripheral vision can help humans and other animals. So that is my ILS activity. Thank you so much for watching.